Here follows a marvelous wonder, which transpired in the town of Hamelin in the year of our Lord 1284, on the feasts of St. John and Paul. A certain young man, 30 years of age, handsome and well-dressed, so that all who saw him admired him because of his appearance, crossed the bridges and entered the town by the west gate. He then began to play all through the town a silver pipe of the most magnificent sort. All the children who heard his pipe, in the number of 130, followed him to the east gate and out of the town to the so-called execution place, or Calvary. There they proceeded to vanish, so that no trace of them could ever be found.
There have been reports of strange creatures in the area.
Witnesses say they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
What is that? Welcome, beloved fofers, doubters, naysayers, non-believers, and skeptics. Welcome to Paranormal Fable or Fact. I am Victor Trevino, joined by my co-host and beautiful wife, Tammy.
We are your humble guides to tales of alleged hoaxes, unbelievable stories, and the overall strange.
Okay, let's mention the email,
Yes.
which is pfableorfact@proton.me. Our Facebook page and the YouTube link should be in the YouTube channel. And hit that notification bell and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy our show. So let's move right into the rules. Rule number 1. We will never purposefully mislead or report false information ever.
Rule number 2. We are not professional podcasters, broadcasters, or audio editors, so mistakes will happen.
Rule number 3. Everyone is entitled to believe what they want and entitled to their own opinions, including us.
Rule number 4. We are offering information and insight as food for thought, not persuasion.
Perfectly done, baby.
Thank you very much.
The show that we're doing today is called The Ratcatcher, and we're going to be focusing on the original version of the story, not the story that you hear today. The story that you hear today is, there's this town of Hamelin overrun by rats. Rats are eating people out of house and home, biting kids, waking people up at night, just being an absolute menace. People are angry, go to the mayor and the city councilman, demand that something be done. So, in desperation, the mayor and the councilman put out this obscene amount of money as a reward for someone to come into the town and take care of these rats. Well, out of the blue comes this strange fellow dressed in these really bright clothes, pied clothes, if you will, and offers, I'll take care of the rats. Busts out with his flute, leads the rats out of the town. Every rat follows him down to the river, where he forces them into the river and they all drown. He comes back to get his reward, and the townsfolk basically, when they put out that advertisement for someone to come and help, they didn't have the money to cover it in some versions. In other versions, they just decide they're not going to pay him, or in other versions, even beyond that, they actually blame him because he so effortlessly takes care of these rats. They actually blame him for bringing the plague in the first place. There's different versions of it. So basically, he gets stiffed. The piper gets stiffed, swears that he's going to get revenge. In some versions, he storms out of the office, and starts playing his pipe immediately, gathering all the children up and, leading them out of the town. In other versions, he waits for a year and comes back, exactly a year later to the day. The kids follow him In some versions, he leads them to this cliff face. The cliff face opens up. Kids follow him into this crevice, and the crevice closes behind them. Kids are never seen again. In some versions, he leads the kids down to the river, drowns them in the River Wessex. In other versions, he keeps the kids captive. They pay the Pied Piper, and the children are returned unharmed. All these versions are later versions and completely made up. We're going to focus on the original version, baby.
Okay.
And that intro that was played with the music and everything introduced in the show, that's only part of it, most of it. I couldn't put the entire recounting of what happened in the intro. It was too long. So basically what the original story is, there's a real town of Hamelin, which I don't think a lot of people realize, maybe it's an actual town, and it was invaded by this single man. There were no rats in the original story, nor was there any betrayal by any townfolk that I could find in the original version. Just this handsome guy strides in from the western part of town, down the center of it playing this pipe. All the kids gather, follow him. He exits through the east gate of town with all the kids in tow, and he takes them to this place of execution, or Calvary, which we'll talk about it in a little more detail here. The rat infestation, and that's it, that's where the story ends. The rat infestation was added to the story later. And now we're going to talk about the second part of the original account as the retelling of Heinrich of Herford. I didn't want to read the whole thing, but I think I'm going to. Just really quick, so that people can be refreshed.
Okay.
Here's the original version, according to Johann von Lüde, who watched this happen. Here follows a marvelous wonder which transpired in the town of Hamelin in the year of our Lord 1284 on the feasts of St. John and Paul. A certain young man, 30 years of age, handsome and well-dressed, so that all who saw him admired him because of his appearance, crossed the bridges and entered the town by the west gate. He then began to play all through the town a silver pipe of the most magnificent sort. All the children who heard his pipe, in the number of 130, followed him to the east gate and out of the town to the so-called execution place, or Calvary. There they proceeded to vanish so that no trace of them could be found. The mothers of the children ran from town to town, but they found nothing. It is written, a voice heard from on high, and a mother was bewailing her son. And as one counts the years according to the years of our Lord, or accounting the first, second, or third year of an anniversary, so did the people in Hamelin reckon the years after the departure and disappearance of their children. This report I found in an old book, and the mother of the Dean Johann von Lüde saw the children depart. That's the original version, baby. And this version, we're going to talk about it here when we go into the red flags. This was found by a monk. We'll go into that, why he talks about this report I found in an old book. And I think even the quote where it says, it is written, this is what he's reading out of this chorus book.
Right.
That the mother of Dean Johann von Lüde, I believe her name was Joanna, she wrote it down in this chorus book, or hymnal for the church, and wrote it in Latin in that book, what she saw.
Okay.
So we have an eyewitness.
Yes, we do.
Basically, and that's one of the inarguable truths. I don't want to talk about it. So let's move on to the first red flag. Now, this case is on trial, baby. Like pretty much every other case that we do where there's inarguable truths involved. So we can't ignore evidence. And the evidence so far, there's been two, and this is mostly a reference to some of the theories that have been put forth by modern, theorists, people that have been studying this, and modern historians. This is the reference to it. There's two pieces of evidence that I think we need to focus on. Number one, and it's the description of what happened to the children. We have two descriptions. The first one is they vanished, and the second one is they disappeared. There's no mention of them moving away, of them being, sold or trying to find jobs, none of that.
Or being drowned.
Or killed with yeah, exactly. None of that. It says they vanished so that no trace of them could be found, and that they disappeared. So, that's important. Let's remember that as we move on through the red flags. So, we're not going to ignore any evidence. If our findings, everybody has to start with a clean slate. If what we're talking about starts to offend or scare people because it doesn't fit into their little box of comfort and logic, that's just tough. We're only going by what we're being told. And I think this is the next red flag. I think it's irresponsible what's going on and what has been going on in science for a long time now. They'll go into these they'll find things, petroglyphs and, hieroglyphs and all of this stuff from like the way past, maybe the ancient times, and they'll pick and choose what they want to believe. And to me, that's irresponsible. Because what was important to them back then, it was important enough for them to write it down, right?
Right.
So why would you ignore that? For example, perfect example is the ancient Egyptians. They have all these hieroglyphs. There's been scientists studying those hieroglyphs for decades, baby, probably centuries. And they follow them and they study them and they find out what they mean. And they write books about it and all this. But when it comes to all those pictures with the people with jackal heads and people with the heads of birds, or this cat-like god called Bast, no, that's just folklore. We're not going to pay attention to that because it doesn't fit into their little box of logic and science. Well, that's just tough. That's what was recorded. Thankfully, there are people in the scientific community that don't ignore this stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't know what it was, baby. Because think about it for a second. The only reason we know what the past looks like is because of what's been carved, painted, written, recorded, sewed, like tapestries and stuff.
Right.
That's the only reason we know what the past looks like. Otherwise, we'd have no idea. We know from the Renaissance because of the paintings.
Right.
What they dressed like. What they danced like. The musical instruments they played.
Yes.
Ditto the Dark Ages. Ditto all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. We know what their haircuts look like. We know what kind of clothing they wore, what kind of jewelry they wore, because of what was written down.
And their architecture.
Architecture, perfect example, exactly.
Agriculture.
And this goes on with ancients in the past, all the way back to time immemorial when humans began civilizations. The only reason we know what happened back then is what the people from the past bothered to keep records of.
Yes.
For us to ignore those just because, that just doesn't make any sense to us logically or scientifically, that's just tough. That's what was important to them. And I think it would be irresponsible to ignore it. And I don't want to go off in too much on it. I know I just totally went on a tangent there, but it is one of the red flags because I think it's important. We have to start this show with a clean slate.
Right.
Keep your mind open because we're going by what was written, what was recorded, and what was witnessed.
Yes.
So let's move on to the next red flag.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. The next red flag, and this is just my own cursory research, because I was just trying to figure it out in my head. Hamelin today, the population is right around 58,000, which is a decent sized, it's like a small city, right?
Yeah.
But it's still very rural, very beautiful. The downtown's just gorgeous, baby, because it's a very old city. I mean, we're talking, it's hundreds of years old. And apparently they had a consensus all the way back into the 1689. And in 1689, the population back then was about 2,400. So we have to go back almost 400 years earlier than that to 1284 when this occurred. So how many people do you think were there, baby? 58,000 today, only 2,400 in 1689. How many people 400 years before that?
Maybe a few hundred.
300, maybe 400?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about 130 children vanishing, that's like a quarter of the population.
Yeah, that's devastating.
That's absolutely devastating. I mean, you're looking at the whole next generation of kids that are going to take over family businesses, carry on the family names, etc., etc.,
Yeah. Or 2 generations.
Almost 2 generations, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. The next red flag, and again, this is just my own cursory research, but this is a very important point, and we have to remember this as we press on with the show. The definition of a child, because all references say are children. So what is a child? Well, Webster's defines it as a child under the age of puberty, but above the age of an infant. So we're talking anywhere between, because I would say like a 2-year-old still considered like a toddler.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe even a 3-year-olds too, huh? They're like infants. they still need to be fed and cleaned and,
Yeah.
So I would think maybe between the ages of 5 and 11 is what we're talking about here. 5 and 11 is what a child would be, because kids do enter puberty at 12, especially girls. Girls mature faster than, boys do. So now modern laws, because somebody brought this up as an argument, they were talking about, no, there's some places that consider children anything under 18. But that's not entirely true. They're talking about modern court cases and laws. Yes, because if you're not 18, in most countries around the world, you're not considered a legal adult. But that doesn't necessarily make you a child. But they call them children because there's no really other way to, classify them except for teenager. But if you're 18, you're also a teenager, right?
Right.
So they call them children. But that's just modern laws and court cases. People in the 13th century wouldn't have cared about any of that. You know what I mean? So, moving on. The next red flag. When we talked about the original story, it talks about this, where the Pied Piper led the kids, was this place of execution of Calvary. I looked high and low, baby. The modern stories talk about a mountaintop. They talk about the river. They talk about a cliff face and all this kind of stuff. But that's the newer versions of the story. The original story didn't talk about mountaintops or cliff faces or rivers. It talked about this place of execution or Calvary, which I believe was like an old pagan area where they used to do like rituals and stuff. And the local people called it the Calvary or the place of execution. I don't think it exists anymore. And I don't think anybody now from modern times even really knows where exactly it was. We're talking, over 700 years ago, baby.
Yeah.
And most of the places today that are credited with being the children's final place are probably just guesses.
Yeah.
And that's,
It was probably destroyed after the children left. The town probably destroyed it.
That's a really good point, baby. That's a good possibility that they might have, because they're so distraught and upset that their kids, vanished. They go out there and just tear it all down, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfectly logical explanation. So the earliest mention of the story seems to have been recorded on a stained glass window placed in the church of Hamelin around 1300. So just 10 to 15 years after it happened, they put this big, from what I understand the description of it, it was a massive window, baby, that told the entire story. But unfortunately, that church was destroyed in a fire in 1660. But they're very detailed accounts from between the 14th and 17th century. I think there's like several accounts in there. So based on the surviving descriptions, a modern reconstruction of the window has been created by Hans Daubertin. I'll probably look that up, try to find it so that I can put it in a YouTube video, because I haven't been able to find it yet, and hopefully I can. It features the colorful figure of the Pied Piper and several figures of children following him dressed in white. So, again, no rat. It wouldn't have rats, because in the original story,
There were none.
there were none. No, back in the 1300s, when that stained glass was created, it would have just had this guy coming in, taking the kids, and taking off. That's it. Now, here's where we get into where the intro was found. This is where they found it. And this is the next red flag. An article by a James P. O'Donnell in the Saturday Evening Post, which was written back in December 24th, 1955. This is a newspaper article. He tells about this elderly German researcher called Heinrich Spaneth. And I know this is a lot of names, but there's only one that matters. Well, Heinrich Spaneth matters too, because he's the one that found it. Apparently, he discovered the earliest version of the story in the Lüneburg City Archives in 1936. On the back of the last tattered page of a dusty chronicle called The Golden Chain, written in Latin in 1370 by a monk, Heinrich of Herford, he found the following account, and that's the intro we just read.
Right.
So that when we go, if we look back at the original story, when he goes, here follows the marvelous wonder, I think that was the monk adding to it. The account starts with where he says a certain young man's 30 years of age, right?
Right.
That's what he read in this book. But see, he's telling his version of finding it. And when we get towards the bottom, he says, it is written, a voice was heard from on high, and a mother was bewailing her son. I think when he said it is written, that's what he's reading. This is the monk being descriptive.
Right.
This monk of Herford. And then at the bottom, he adds his own little more of his own observation. He put, "This report I found in an old book." And I believe the old book the monk is referring to was this chorus book where Johann von Lüde wrote down her account. What other book could it be?
Right.
Right? Because this was back in 1370, baby. Only 86 years after it occurred. So it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
And then he even name drops. He says, "And the mother of the Dean Johann von Lüde saw the children depart." So I just thought that was fascinating. So, well, let's move on. Now the next red flag is this. We're going to discuss the chorus book. From what I could find, the chorus book was last known circa 1384. That's the last time it was seen. So almost exactly 100 years after this happened. The Deacon Lüde, this Johann von Lüde, the guy that's the son of Joanna, had it. But see, he left an inheritance in 1378, which means he wouldn't have been alive in 1384. So that means the book probably vanished in 1384, because remember, the monk saw it in 1370. So he probably went to go see this elderly gentleman, Johann, and said, "Hey, what is that?" "Oh, that's my mom's book. She wrote down this story that happened 100 years ago, 80-something years ago." And the guy looks at it and goes, "Whoa."
Yeah.
And he recorded it in this golden chain, this dusty old chronicle. So
Or it could have been donated to the church.
maybe it was in the church, but he still would have had it because he was still alive. He didn't die until 8 years after that. Remember, the monk wrote it in 1370.
Yeah.
This guy didn't die until around 1378, so I think he would have still had it. Or maybe he did donate it to church, and that's where he saw it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I believe he saw the chorus book in 1370, in this 1370 reference to the original story. What other book could he be talking about?
Right.
So I just thought that was fascinating. I wanted to bring it up. Okay, now here's where we start getting into the evidence of what happened. There was a prayer in the museum of Hamelin. I found it. I read it. It starts talking about how we have to be good people. This is a sermon, and I'm not going to go into it because I'm not trying. "Oh, there you go, God boy." Not going to do it. But it talks about how this wizard came into the town and took their kids, which I thought was fascinating. Unfortunately, I could not re-find it. I don't know where I found it. I even went to the museum's website and tried to find it, baby. I have no idea where I found it. No idea, but I just thought it was fascinating that they mentioned it was either a wizard or a demon or something. I think it was a wizard is what they said. But anyway, that's that red flag, because that's one of the pieces of evidence. Remember, they actually wrote it down in a sermon in like the 1500s, I believe. And I'm sure people probably have seen this because it is in the museum in Hamelin right now today. So moving on, the next red flag, we're going to talk about the Hamelin Town Records 1384. In 1384, they recorded, "It has been 100 years since our children left." They actually put it in the town records. How significant could it have been? Again, if we're talking about the kids moving away or, trying to find employment, which are some of the more modern theories, why would they record it?
Right.
100 years after they were gone. Also, if you notice, it says since our children left. It doesn't say since 100 people, 130 people, adults and their children, these families moved away. Because if they had, why would that be tragic enough for them to write it down 100 years later? You know what I'm saying? Because people moved all the time.
Right.
So this one's fascinating. I didn't know this. I had to, my cursory research dug this one up. Apparently in the museum in Hamelin today, they have a stone that has a carving in it. It says, in the year 1556, 272 years after the magician stole 130 children from this city, this gate was founded. Of course, the gate doesn't exist anymore because,
Right.
It's from 1556. But they actually carved it into the stone that was part of the original gate. And the people of Hamelin took this stone, and they have it in the museum today. So moving on, the next red flag. There's a street in Hamelin today, baby, called Bungelosenstrasse. Bungelosenstrasse, which basically means street without drums. It's believed to be one of the last places the children were ever seen. So to this day, music and dancing are not allowed.
Wow.
Anywhere on that street, which is crazy, huh?
Yeah, that is.
So, I don't know if that's actual evidence, because it's just thought that might have been where they were last seen. But I just thought it was fascinating that they still don't allow celebration. Now we're going to get into the modern theories, baby.
Okay.
Some of these are decent. Most of them are just, to me, borderline debunking, because they just don't make any sense. But we're not bashing them. We're not trying to, but we are going to cross-examine them. We are going to look at them deeply and really poke at them and dig at them. Because when you hear it, because when I was reading some of these theories, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But then when I actually started to look at what they were talking about, and I started doing my own cursory research, those theories just fell apart.
Oh, interesting.
So we're going to have to kind of pay attention to that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So the first theory is that it was a plague, and that the reason the Pied Piper was given these colorful clothes, was because that was supposed to be a symbol of this plague. So he's symbolic. He comes through and wipes out 130 kids, and that's what we're talking about. It's just a story.
Right.
Okay, the perfectly good example, baby, except you have to ignore evidence in order to support that one. Number one, there is no historical evidence that a plague ever swept through that area.
Right.
Until almost 100 years later, when the Black Death came through there and wiped out thousands and thousands of people, of course. So that one doesn't match up. If there was a plague that killed 130 kids just in the town of Hamelin, baby, it would have wiped out thousands of children all across Germany.
Yes.
No records of that.
Right.
And what disease do you know, and this is my own observation, what disease can you think of that only targets children?
I don't, at the top of my head, I don't know.
I don't either.
Mm-mm.
Now, I know that there's certain diseases that children are more susceptible to, along with the elderly. The elderly and children will die more often than a healthy adult or something.
Right.
But that disease doesn't specifically only affect the kids. It doesn't talk about anybody else dying, except for 130 children. So
also, there's no gravesite or mass grave, because
excellent point.
Yeah, because these people were so devastated that they noted it in town records. They did a gate. They did all these monuments, the stained glass. So they would have put up some kind of
memorial.
Monument
or a monument. Yep.
So it just doesn't point out.
Yeah, that's a. So glad you said that, baby. What happened to the kids?
Right.
They said they vanished. Remember, we have two descriptions: vanished and disappeared.
Correct.
If they died, they would have just said they died, or we buried them here, or like you said, they would have left a monument.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just say they vanished. Why would you say that?
No.
But that's an inarguable truth. We'll keep moving on.
Okay.
Theory number 2. But again, that first theory of it just a disease, it just falls short. It falls apart after you really start looking at it. Theory number 2, this is emigration. Migration, not immigration. And you know the difference between emigration and immigration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The argument is, if someone emigrated to another town from Hamelin, they would be known as the children of Hamelin. And that's the explanation. So the kids just moved away, and they said, oh, the children of Hamelin were all lost to us. That's the story. Everybody pack it up and go home. Well, not so fast there, Slick, because the only people that would refer to them as the children of Hamelin is wherever they arrived at. They would refer to them as the children of Hamelin, if this is even real, if this is even true.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that fact is true, that they did call people from another town the children of the town they left from. In this case, the children of Hamelin. But let's say they go to Berlin, and the people in Berlin are referring to them as the children of Hamelin. Perfectly fine, I'm not going to dispute that, but what does that have to do with the people in Hamelin? Yeah. They're not going to say the children of Hamelin left. They're going to say our children.
Yes.
Now, the argument is, well, that's what we're talking about, though, man. They're not talking about actual kids. They're talking about people leaving. But again, then why would they write it down 100 years later It has been 100 years since our children vanished.
Right.
Why would it talk about this Johanna von Lüde, write it down on this chorus book, that the mothers of the missing children went from town to town? I mean, baby,
Looking for their children.
they were looking for their kids.
Right.
And they vanished so that no trace of them could be found. Mm-hmm. That's not people moving away.
No.
Sorry. This falls short.
Yes.
And another thing was that went along with this, that I saw the argument for this theory, because this is the one I believe that's most accepted today, is that they found surnames in other towns that can be traced back to Hamelin. And I'm like, so what?
Yeah.
What does that prove? That people move all the time.
Yeah.
Who can? If you can trace, I think, they did genealogy on my name. We got something in the mail. My dad did like 20 years ago or something. And my name originates from Italy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Italy? We're Mexican. We're not even Italian. But that's where the name originates from.
Yeah.
So people move.
Yes, they do.
You know what I mean? Because we're in America, and my name originates from Italy. So the idea that just because they found surnames, that proves that the kids moved away? No. Not at all. And then the other thing that was in reference to emigration was this crusade. That the kids were shipped away to help with the crusade. But again, that's why at the beginning, baby, we talked about what a child is.
Yeah.
Who's going to send 5 kids that are 5 through 11 off to fight in a crusade?
No, you would send the teenagers and the young adults.
Send the young men. Or just young men. I don't think young women fought in wars back then. Just young men did. But you would send young men, not children. So moving on to theory number 3, which is the natural disaster. And the most of the ones that are, because I guess there's evidence of floods and earthquakes, so those were kind of thrown out. The ones that are harder to detect this long later would be either a landslide or a sinkhole. Okay, well, again, this theory falls apart, though. What landslide is going to take all 130 children out of a town? They're all playing. They're all like holding hands in a line, standing about the base of this mountain.
Yeah.
So that one landslide took them all out.
Yeah.
Same thing with the sinkhole, where they all playing in one spot, all gathered up in a little tight group, and the sinkhole opened up and swallowed them all.
Yeah.
Plus, if we look back at the evidence, baby, they didn't talk about the earth swallowing the kids up or the kids being buried.
No.
They said they vanished or disappeared.
Right.
There would be evidence of a landslide left behind after their kids were taken, right?
Yes.
There would be evidence of a sinkhole. If you see a massive hole in the ground that wasn't there the day before, I think the townspeople would take notice.
Yeah. And they would have noted it.
They would have noted it.
Records.
Exactly. So, again, theory number 3 falls short.
Yeah.
Theory number 4, mass kidnapping. Okay, this one to me is borderline debunking, because actually just about every one of these is borderline debunking, because they make no sense. To some people they might, but to me they make no sense. To me it's desperation. It's trying to throw out any explanation besides the obvious.
Right.
That something unexplained happened.
But it would take more than one man to kidnap 130.
You need a small army.
Yeah, you would need horses.
You need
wagons.
You'd need a way to transport them, like cages or something, or shackles, or it would have caused a massive ruckus. Can you imagine trying to round up 130 children?
No.
Especially when they don't want you to round them up.
Yeah.
You're not going to, oh, you want to put me in that cage, mister? Sure, I'll climb in the cage for you. No, they're going to take off.
Yeah.
They're going to start screaming, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy.
Yeah.
You know, even if let's just say, let's be arbitrary, baby. For the sake of argument, let's just say the adults were in the church, because remember, they're celebrating this feast of St. John and Paul. I guess that's like a Catholic thing. I don't know. But all the adults are there and the kids aren't. And I don't know if that's like a normal practice, but that's what was said.
Yeah.
And obviously not all adults
Yeah.
went in, because she watched him cross the bridge.
Right.
Which means she saw him from a distance. You know what I mean? And watched him walk into town. Then she says he busted out with the flute. And I don't think she was the only one. There's probably several adults out, but none of them heard the flute.
Yeah.
The only one that heard the flute were the kids. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that adults are all in church.
Right.
They're singing praises to God. Oh, you just gotta mention it, don't you, God, boy? They're singing praises to God. They're worshiping and they're being good Christians. They're all singing so loudly they can't hear the ruckus outside.
Right.
Of these men chasing kids, horses, wagons, there would be evidence left behind.
Right. There'd be tracks.
There would have been an eyewitness. Hey, these guys came in and took all of our kids.
There would have been tracks from the horses and the men.
Wagon tracks. There would have been stuff knocked over.
Yeah.
Your doors open, windows broken because they were chasing these kids down, right?
Right.
So that one falls short, as far as I'm concerned. There would have been evidence left behind. And why would she say that they just vanished when she watched these guys take them away?
Right.
And why didn't she raise the alarm quicker? You know what I mean? She would have ran immediately right to the church. Or there would have... Plus, there's town guards, baby. I looked this up.
Yeah, if they were under attack, she would have ran to the guards.
Yeah, there was what was called the watch.
Yeah.
Town watchmen or town guards. And she would have went and got these guys, these peacemakers. They would have raised the alarm.
Right.
Everything would have been fine, or there would have been a huge battle being fought in this town back then. Either way, the parents wouldn't just been sitting there twiddling their thumbs in church while their kids are being kidnapped. It just doesn't make any sense. So moving on to the next theory. The children were sold to repopulate a part of Germany that had recently become war-torn, and the legend was created to hide the shame of the people from Hamelin.
But see, that doesn't make sense because they were too young. So it would be like a decade before they could populate parts of Germany.
Exactly. Why would you send, and again, this is why we defined the definition of a child, why would you send children to repopulate an area?
Right. You would send the teenagers and the young adults.
And the young adults, unmarried preferably, because then they could meet somebody there, start their families, perfect. You're not going to send a 9-year-old.
No.
Or two 10-year-olds, a boy and a girl
Or
to
a
go...
5-year-old.
Or a 6 or 7-year-old, boy and a girl to go repopulate an area because it's going to be years before they can do anything. Plus, if it's war-torn, stuff's destroyed.
Yeah, they can't build by themselves, the children.
Exactly. What are these kids going to build their own houses? What? An 8-year-old out there trying to swing an axe to cut a tree down. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
So again, borderline debunking. No evidence needed. That's all that happened. The people of Hamelin were just ashamed of themselves, and they made up the legend to, explain why they sold their own kids off. Bunch of scumbags. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It makes no sense. Theory number 6, and this is the dancing mania explanation. This is that where you get into that mass hypnosis garbage. It's number 1. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking it, but to me, it's debunking is what it is, because it makes no sense.
Right.
There's no dancing mentioned.
Yeah.
She didn't say that children danced behind the Pied Piper. She didn't even say that the person playing the pipe was dancing.
Yeah.
She just said he started playing the silver flute or silver pipe, and all the kids started following him.
Right.
No mention of dancing, or in fact, and this is one of the inarguable truths, so we'll go into it in more detail later. She couldn't even hear the music.
Right.
Symptoms of the dancing mania. People would dance erratically, convulsing almost. In other words, it's not a natural, happy dance. You wouldn't see kids skipping, and no, they would be doing this weird, like almost zombie-like kind of weird movements, erratic movements, leaping in the air, clapping their hands, erratically, or holding hands so that they could barely even move, and while doing all these erratic movements. Those are some of the symptoms. None of that is described in what Joanna saw.
No, she just said follow.
They just followed him. Mm-hmm. Another thing that is attributed to this dancing mania is people would be reciting all of these Christian deities while they're walking, or doing this weird, like, zombie dance walking down the road.
Yeah.
They'd be, busting out with all these names of angels and, all of this kind of stuff, or actually speaking in tongues, which, again, Joanna doesn't mention.
Right.
Some people would actually fall asleep after dancing and never wake up again. In other words, it was like some type of... There's a lot of theorists now that think that it might have been ricin poisoning.
Yeah.
Or ricin, I believe it is. It's a ergot. It's a poison created by ergot, which is this fungus that infects wheat.
Yeah.
And they believe what happened is this ergot had some kind of a weird, maybe like a mutation.
Yeah.
And people ate this corrupted wheat and got ricin poisoning. And that's why they started acting all crazy, because it was like this weird mutation or, version of...
But that's not mentioned in the original story.
But not exactly. None of that is mentioned by Joanna. She's not talking about kids convulsing and falling asleep in the street and dying right there and never waking up again.
Yeah.
The kids followed this guy out of town and vanished. And we'll get into that more in our truth.
Because if they fell asleep and just died right there on the street, there would be a grave.
Or evidence left behind.
Yes, evidence.
They wouldn't say they disappeared. There's a body there.
Right.
Okay.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. Exactly. Okay, moving on. Now we're getting to our favorite part, baby, the inarguable truths.
Here we go.
Inarguable truth number 1.
Every myth and legend is based on some type of reality, no matter how removed.
Correct.
No, baby, you got to read the...
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, so confident. All right.
Inarguable truth number 2.
The original story talked about a man in his 30s, so beautiful as to demand to be admired using a magnificent silver pipe.
Inarguable truth number 3.
You do not describe someone leaving town or moving away as vanishing.
Inarguable truth number 4.
Whatever the piper played only affected the children.
Inarguable truth number 5.
The original story did not include rats. They were included much later.
Inarguable truth number 6.
There was an eyewitness account who saw the piper leading the children away.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back to inarguable truth number 1, which is every myth and legend is based on some type of reality, no matter how removed. If we're going to talk about the paranormal angle, which, you know, because we're on this show and we do this podcast and this YouTube channel thing, you and I dig it. We dig the paranormal, right?
Yeah.
So I had you look in to creatures that could possibly fit this explanation of what happened, and what did you find?
So there's a folklore about the river nearby this town, and there are nixes, which are merfolk who would lure people into the water and drown them. Now, a nix is a male and a nixie is a female. They are said to love song, music, and dancing. They can be in human form, especially the females, and they have slit ears, and the females have a wet hem on their clothing.
And that's how you can tell what they are.
Right.
Okay.
Now, the nix, which are the males, they can form not only human, but they could be forms of fish or a snake. And then the females, the nixies, can bear a tail of a fish. But they both can assume they could both assume a human form. And the nixes are portrayed as malicious in some stories, and sometimes harmless and friendly in other stories.
Okay, so basically, the female, the nixies were more mermaid-like.
Mermaid looking.
Okay, because but both they're basically they're shapeshifters. Is
basically
what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. And because they like song and dance, they would sing sometimes to lure people to the river to try to drown them. Or there's even reports of them playing music.
Correct.
To attract people to the river. And what I found was fascinating, baby, that is in some of this, because there's different versions of this creature, you know, because there's Scandinavian versions, Norwegian versions, the UK version, the German version, all of this, but it's the same type of creature. In some versions, they're water sprites. Right. But basically, in one of those versions, this, I would call it a cryptid or a legend, mythical creature or whatever, they preferred to go after women, pregnant women, or young children.
Yeah.
Which to me is fascinating. So, could we be talking about one of these nixies or this nix getting a silver flute or pipe and going through the town and leading all the kids away?
But he didn't lead them to water.
He didn't lead them to the river. Mm-hmm. That's where we fall short.
Yeah.
Plus, she saw him coming, and she would have known what a nix was.
Yeah.
She probably would have ran over there and looked at his ears.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the ways that you can identify what they are, is by the male. Apparently, when they're trying to impersonate humans, the male has a slit for an ear, and the females, the nixies, the hems of their clothing are always wet.
Right.
And she would have known that, this Joanna. So, I don't know. I thought the reason this is interesting to me is it just goes along with the inarguable truth, which is every myth is based on reality no matter how far-fetched.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of it. This could be, I mean, if we want to go way out on a limb, don't get me wrong, I realize this, but this could be a possible explanation. Because this creature did target children, these creatures did play musical instruments or sing, and these creatures did try to lure people away and harm them.
Yeah.
So, there you go. I think we covered that one enough.
Yeah,
huh?
I think so.
Okay, moving on to inarguable truth number 2. The original story talked about a man in his 30s, so beautiful as to demand to be admired, using a magnificent silver pipe. This is extremely important, baby, because this is going to go along with my conclusion, maybe even yours, because I think, well, anyway, I think that line in that description is very important. Anyone who saw him would admire him because of his appearance. So Joanna's talking about even men that would see this guy would go, wow, you know.
That's a good-looking fellow.
That guy's got it together, you know. And women would look at him and basically just go, whoa, what a handsome young man, you know.
Yeah.
That's very important to me because it's a show. It's a standing out. He's so well dressed and so handsome that she was like, whoa. I mean, she noticed him, like I said, crossing the bridges before he even got to town.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that because she might have been holding a newborn when she was reporting this or writing this down in the hymnal. In fact, the newborn may have been little Johann von Lüde when he was a baby.
Right.
Maybe not, though, because we don't know how many children she had. He might not even have been born yet, or she might not even have been pregnant with him yet, because he was still alive 80-something years later. So
Right. And if adults admired him, then of course children are going to look.
Exactly. He leads the children away. And the other significant thing that I thought about this description, which is inarguable, is she talks about this silver pipe. That is so unusual, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, even there was members of royalty when they had musical instruments that didn't have silver instruments.
Right.
This is a flashy, showy, most, pipes back then were made out of bone, cane, and I don't know what that was. I guess like sugar cane or something, or wood. So they were carved.
Right.
You can't carve a pipe out of silver.
No.
You have to forge it, you know what I mean?
You'd have to forge it.
You know, or mold it, you know what I mean? And I don't think they did that back then. So the fact that he had a silver pipe is very significant. It was unusual, it was flashy, it was attention-getting. And I thought the most important part of what she describes, that he was well-dressed, she does not mention pied clothing.
Right.
I don't know when that version, because this is the original version we're talking about. This is the eyewitness looking right at him. She just said he was well-dressed and handsome.
Well, can I ask a question?
Of course you can, baby.
What's pied clothing?
Pied clothing is a contrasting pattern of usually really bright colors right next to each other. There are some styles of clothing that I've seen that are kind of pied, but not really. That was mostly like in the 80s. Mm-hmm. You know, we had like the piano ties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But where you would see pied patterns now is like on family crests. You know, family coat of arms.
Oh, okay.
Where you have the shield and you have those crazy colors, blues and yellows and reds right next to each other, and they got all funky patterns on them.
Yeah.
That's what a pied pattern would look like. So when they talk about this Pied Piper, he would look like a jester. Like a court jester or something. He would
look like a clown?
Like a clown, yeah. But again, Joanna didn't say any of that.
Yeah.
She just said he was well-dressed and handsome. So that the whole Pied Piper thing happened much later. I don't know how much later, but in this original version that happened in 1284, no mention of pied clothing. So
interesting.
Let's move on. Inarguable truth number 3. this is a huge one because I don't understand why it's being ignored by so many historians and so many people today. You do not describe someone leaving town or moving away as vanishing.
No.
Baby, here, we live here. Our neighbor across the street's out watering his front lawn. Our neighbors next door move out. The house is empty. So we go over there and say, hey, what happened to the family next door to us? Well, they vanished so that no trace of them could be found. He wouldn't say that.
No, he'd just say they moved.
Oh, they moved away.
Yeah.
Or they moved to Sacramento, or they moved to New York, or they moved to Idaho, or wherever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't say they vanished or disappeared.
No.
Oh, they vanished.
Yeah.
The people that used to live next to you, they just disappeared. And the English language hasn't changed so much from then to now.
Right.
To where we would just have this completely different understanding of what that means.
Correct.
They would still just be moving away. Or relocating or immigrating or whatever. Because that's probably what they said back then, because we don't really use the term emigration anymore.
No, we don't.
We just say move or relocation or, I'm moving over there because I found a job or whatever,
And then if you said disappeared or vanished, then you would be like asking more questions.
Yeah, that would, yeah. And it's just odd. And again, this is mostly in reference to some of the theories, because I didn't make this point then. It's weird that all the children would move away on the same day.
Yes.
Because her description is on the feasts of St. John and Paul.
Right.
I'm not a Catholic, but
that's a day.
I believe it's just one day, right?
Yeah.
So all 130 kids left in a day, even if, let's just say for the sake of argument, baby, again, we're giving some leeway here, even though it's ignoring evidence, but we'll give some leeway. Maybe they were talking about the children of Hamelin being families. What is so significant about 130 people moving away? Why would they carve it into a gate?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would they put it in their town records?
Right.
So something deeper, something darker, something more tragic had to happen.
Yep.
That's just the bottom line. And I think it's very odd in support of this inarguable truth number 3, you do not describe someone leaving town or moving away as vanishing. All the kids moved away on the one day?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
No.
So I think we covered that one enough.
Yeah, we did.
We're just rolling right through these, baby. Inarguable truth number 4. Whatever the piper played only affected the children. And I think this one's almost a mic drop.
Yeah.
Because it starts to borderline on the paranormal. Because how do you explain that?
Yeah.
There's her account, and I don't remember where I saw this. I think it might have been somewhere. But even in later accounts, I've seen other historians make this claim. Nobody could hear the music. Some of the movies that were created afterwards, there's like a cartoon that was like created like in the 1800s or something, or it was a puppets.
Oh, okay.
Like a puppet show, and they have like the transcripts of it and stuff.
Right.
They talked about how no one else in the town could hear the music except for the kids.
Yeah.
So that was referenced from somewhere.
Right.
Is what I'm saying, and if that's true, how do you explain that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's true because I couldn't find any evidence of it, because she did describe him as playing the pipe.
Yeah.
But I don't think she could hear the music.
Yeah.
It only affected the children, and only the kids followed him, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Or the music only affected the children.
Or yeah, whatever music he was playing only affected them, and she just heard whatever she heard, or she didn't hear anything at all, like I'm saying. Right. But it only affected them.
Yeah.
That is so odd, baby. And again, to me, that touches the borders of the paranormal.
Right.
Because how else do you explain that?
Right.
What can someone do right now, baby, that's only going to affect kids?
Yeah.
Hypnosis,
Yeah.
whatever crazy explanation you want to give. You can't just focus it on one age group, whether it's disease,
Right.
whatever.
It would be too difficult.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Is what it would be. And I think that pretty much covers that one. I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's extremely significant. Because again, it's borderlining on the paranormal.
Correct.
So let's move on to the next inarguable truth, which is number 5. The original story did not include rats. They were included much later. The reason I put this inarguable truth in there is because I believe, and this is just my own belief, I didn't read this anywhere, maybe somebody else came up with this theory or something, but I believe the reason they added rats to the story is to explain why this happened. to kind of CYA on the people of Hamelin back then. You know, the people from 1284. Because otherwise, you know, that they did something wrong. That they wronged this piper, and that's why he came back and took their kids. Because otherwise, baby, this was an invasion.
Yeah.
This guy came into their town unprovoked. This guy played his pipe and took all their kids without... They didn't even know about it. They were in church, most of them.
Right.
Only she was the only eyewitness. And we're going to talk about it a little more in the next Inarguable Truth, but it was completely unwarranted. They didn't do anything to this guy. And they were so desperate, they ran from town to town looking for their kids, they just vanished. So I think later, as the years progressed, they added the rats. Hundreds of years later, saying, well, you know, that piper didn't just come in here for no reason, you know. They stiffed him on a payment, and then they added the rats. See, he took the rats away and they didn't pay him. That's why he took the kids.
Doesn't make sense to me.
I agree, it doesn't make sense because the original version doesn't mention the rats.
No.
But I think it's profound.
To me, it doesn't make sense why you would add it.
Doesn't.
Why does there need to be an explanation why this man walked into your town and took your children? It just happened. You don't have to have an explanation.
Yeah,
why
but
it
it's stuff like this doesn't happen, baby. So I think the assumption was that they did something wrong. They had to have done something wrong because how else do you explain it? This guy just came in here and took the kids. I mean, is there any other... I don't know of any other case in human history where this happened, except during war or famine or disease or something like that. The whole point to the Inarguable Truth is I believe the rats were added trying to explain why this happened to the people of Hamelin. Because, baby, we don't know. They might have not been good people. Maybe even though it talks about them being in church, being good Christians, what if they weren't? What if they weren't actually in church? What if they were doing something wrong? Maybe there's something seriously wrong in that town, and this guy comes through there and takes all the kids to save them from these horrible people that lived back then.
No, I don't believe that either.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know.
It was just an unwarranted, unprovoked attack, and that's odd.
Yeah.
That's very odd. Again, borderline and paranormal, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Inarguable Truth number 6. We're at the finish line, baby.
Okay.
There was an eyewitness account who saw the piper leading the children away. We can't ignore this evidence. This Johann von Lüde watched this guy do this. And for some reason, that's just being broomed under the rug now. Oh, no. She didn't know what she was talking about. She wrote it down in a hymnal. People saw the hymnal. There are several references to it all throughout history. They put it in the stained glass window in their church. This monk comes by 80-something years later and sees the hymnal and writes his own version of it in this golden chain, this dusty chronicle. It's found again much later by this researcher, that Spanath guy, finds the monk's version of it in 1936.
Right.
So that years later in 1955, they actually wrote about it in the newspaper.
Yep.
It was recorded, it was written down, and this is what happened. Regardless of whether it fits in your little box of comfort, this is what she said. She wrote it down, supposedly with a baby in her arms. She sees him coming across the bridge. So she noticed him from a distance, talked about how well-dressed he was and how handsome he was. He busts out with his pipe, leads all the children out of the town. So she had to have followed him, baby. Because if he led the kids out the east gate, she had to be following him to see what was going on. Where are all the kids going?
Yeah.
Hey, kids, come back. Where are you going?
Where are you going? Yeah.
She's chasing them down the road. And either, I don't know how far the Calvary was, because, again, I don't think it exists anymore.
Yeah.
But they probably started up the trail going to that spot, because there probably wasn't a lot of trails back then. As a matter of fact, if you look at Hamelin now, that area east of Hamelin is all it's like a bunch of hiking trails and stuff, and like a mountainous area.
Yeah.
Where there's there's like a couple of roads through there, but most of them are just like hiking trails and stuff. So it's still very wild even today. So how many trails could have been back then 700 years ago?
Right.
So all she probably did was follow him maybe a couple of 100 yards out of town, saw what trail all of them were taking.
Right.
Oh my goodness, he's taking them to the Calvary. She runs back to town. Hey, somebody took her kids.
Help.
They all run over there to the Calvary, to the place of execution, with their broomsticks and their pitchforks and stuff to whoop this guy, rip him a new one because he took their kids.
Right.
And there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So then it goes on to the next part of it, where this mother's bewailing her children. The parents ran to the other neighboring towns looking for their kids. They just vanished.
And she returned to the church and wrote this down.
No sinkholes, no landslides, no mention of graves, no mention of diseases, no mention of any of those other theories that we're talking about. They didn't talk about the kids dancing or doing anything weird.
No.
They simply vanished,
Yep.
so that no trace of them could ever be found. That's insane, baby.
Yep.
But this is what happened, and this is what she described. So in conclusion, baby, what do you think the Pied Piper was?
I think that it was either a demon or the devil impersonating somebody we know who would be in their 30s, who the children beloved and the people beloved. There's so many fascinating parts of this story.
So you're talking about Jesus?
Yes, because...
Oh, there you go. No. Are you saying that he used Jesus' appearance to lure the kids, or do you still think he used the pipe?
I think both. I think he impersonated.
Interesting.
He either he impersonated like an angelic being. You know what I mean? Like a good being. It had to be a demon or the devil himself, and took the children away. Because that's what the demons and devils do. That's what the devil does. The devil tries to take us away.
But see, and this is why I put that inarguable truth in there. Can demons and devils affect people without being invited in? We're naturally protected against that stuff, baby. They have to tempt us. We have to choose to welcome them in. Even when you talk about Ouija boards, in order for something to affect you, you have to invite it in. That's why they say you have to choose your wording carefully. Because if you're just dealing with a spirit or whatever, big deal. But if something demonic or something ancient, or, these ancient evil spirits that are out there, that are supposedly the spirits of the original Nephilim that were killed in the flood, they couldn't go to heaven or hell, according to some of the scripture, because they weren't quite demons, but they weren't angels either, so they were stuck here. And it's those ancient spirits, when people talk about evil spirits and stuff, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
According to some people.
Don't you think the pipe would have been how he got them to agree? Like following him would have been an exception?
Yes, but you're in other words, we can't just be sitting here doing this podcast and all of a sudden I become a demon and I'm possessed and I turn and start murdering you because the devil just took me over. I have to invite the devil in.
Well, maybe somebody in the town did.
But that's what I'm saying. But then why did he go after the kids? Because what could the kids have done?
That of a father's sin.
What did you just say? That of the father what?
Sin.
Oh, you're talking about the sins of the father.
Yeah, sins of a father.
That's possible. Oh, you just gotta take it there, don't you, God boy? Just have to talk about Jesus and God. I'm gonna go listen to another podcast. Yes, that's possible. But that's where I was going with that inarguable truth, baby. That they made up the rats to cover for themselves because they were up to no good. Oh, we were all in church minding our own business, and here comes this guy taking our kids away. Doesn't make any sense if you're talking about a devil or a demon, baby. They had to have done something to provoke this thing, to empower this thing to harm their children. That's where I was going with. They couldn't have been innocent.
Yeah.
And they created this story of the rats to cover that up. And I know some people are probably listening going, well, didn't that guy say that they made up the rats to cover their shame when they sold their kids off? Yes. And I said that was silly because that doesn't make any sense. You could say, well, this doesn't make any sense either. You're talking about the paranormal. Well, if you don't believe, then yes, it doesn't make any sense. But if you do believe, to me, it makes more sense than that. You're selling 8 and 9-year-olds to go repopulate an area.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
Well, that's my conclusion. I think it was a demon.
You think it was a demon or devil?
Yep.
But see, so you are kind of supporting the idea that the people of Hamelin back then, we're not talking about the people of Hamelin now, back in 1284, that those people might not have been doing what they needed to be doing.
It could have been just one person that didn't.
You think so?
One person could have affected the whole town.
I guess that's true.
It could have been just like the mayor or somebody. You don't know.
I pretty much agree with you. We're talking about evil, baby.
Yeah, that's...
We're talking about something that harmed the innocent.
Right.
Because according to most Christian doctrine, under the 9 and under, you're considered innocent, and you'll automatically get into heaven. Anything 9 and above, you're responsible for your temptations, your decisions, and that's when you can be judged. But if you're 9 and under, which is probably the majority, the majority of what we're talking about, these kids, they were innocent.
Right.
So for it to happen like this, there had to be something significant going on.
Yeah.
Something severe, you know?
And with that being said, that you were saying severe, they were so devastated about this tragedy that they noted it in different spots. The city records, the gate, the stained glass window. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think it was the people. I think it was certain people. I think there was a
small group of
people that caused this man
that
or
were doing
this demon to come into their town and take the children.
Yep. That opened it up or
Yeah.
made them vulnerable.
Yep.
When the rest of the people were doing what they were supposed to be doing and minding their own businesses and stuff and just trying to live life. And
Yeah, because you said there were people that weren't in the church.
yeah, there had to have been because, I mean, Joanna wasn't. So maybe because she had an infant. I don't know.
Yeah.
That pretty much does it, baby.
Yeah, I think it does. In conclusion, everybody, please check out our Facebook, check out our YouTube, subscribe if you like it, leave comments, let us know if you have any stories or any folklore or myths or legends you would like us to look up. Put them in the comments. And as always, thank you for listening. Have a great night.
Like I said, we've already gotten a couple of suggestions. And they are in the works. It's going to be down the road, though, because I've already been doing research. We're like 3 weeks ahead, and we only put out new shows every 2 weeks. This show is an older show that we're re-recording because the sound quality on the first version was so poor. I didn't want to take the time to do a YouTube video to it. You know, I would rather re-record them for better sound quality and then create the video, and that's basically what we're doing today. So The next and final one will be the All in the Family, which are my personal stories. We're going to re-record that one, and that'll be the last one. After that, we'll only be posting stories one every 2 weeks. So, and in order to post these older shows again, we have to delete the versions that are on YouTube right now. You can't just replace them, unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe YouTube did that because there was too many videos or something, or I don't know, but you basically have to delete the old one before you could put a new one in. So that removes all of our all the comments that we get, all the likes and all that. It's unfortunate, but it's what needs to be done. But anyway, yes, thank you for listening. We appreciate all the support, and good night.
Good night, everybody.